us going. All right, so this is a fireside chat with Oleg, of course, and Tomer Weller. He's the Chief Product Officer at Stellar Development Foundation with a wealth of experience in blockchain technology and a very keen eye on practical applications. We're obviously continuing the theme of beyond the infrastructure bubble, and we'll dive into this to kind of see how we can bridge the gap between infrastructure and meaningful user adoption. So please welcome Tomer to the room. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tomer, I'm really excited to meet you and share a stage with you because, well, first of all, you're working on a very interesting project that I know we've been chatting to for a while, and even though today's announcement is not going to include you guys, we hope that it is not far off. But my personal excitement is that you are a product person. There aren't that many in Web3, and to be honest, I meet so many projects that don't have a lot of attention put on the product. It's absolutely staggering. And I just want to ask you, why product? How come? And how come that you've been doing product for Stellar for 7 years? That's a very, it's an infinite amount of time in Web3 world. So yeah, can you kick off with that?
Of course. Thank you for having me. Thanks for everyone here. I think you're rocking this. This is much bigger than any other side event I've seen. We have a lot of empty events in Singapore, so clearly Sweat Economy is doing something right. Good job there. On the topic of product, I actually joined Stellar 7 years ago as an engineer, not as a product person. And I completely stumbled upon Web3. I had no intention of doing anything in the space, but I somehow got introduced to Jed McCaleb, who's the founder of Stellar, founded some other companies in the space as well. We hit it off, and I kind of moved on a whim from Boston to San Francisco 7 years ago to join Stellar. Product is not something that I ever was interested in or understood or even was on my radar. But very quickly I understood that there are a lot of gaps when you're building products. One thing that I noticed is we had really talented engineers building really cool tech, amazing BD people that are out there closing deals, but we just had gaps in kind of closing the loop. And I think probably the biggest, one of the biggest challenges in building companies in general is this idea of making informed decisions, right? Because when you start a company, you have an idea, you're three people in a room. It's very easy to move fast and make decisions. But as an organization grows, you need to kind of put some methodology behind your decision making. At one point, I was talking with Danelle, who's been our CEO for a few years now. She was like, Tomer, you're a good engineer, but what you're actually doing is product. So I think we should make that official. And that happened. And, for the past couple of years, I've been running our product org. What I tell our PMs all the time is your job is to help make decisions, because in building a company, deciding what to do and almost more importantly, what not to do is very difficult. And in order to do that, you need to know the ecosystem, you need to know the space, you need to know the customers, you need to know the capabilities. And that's what a product person is, a jack of all trades, understanding everything, have a bird's eye view.
And it sounds like you've created a product organization in Stellar. Was there a product people or product org before, or not really?
Yeah, so I think it really, it started to trickle. We started hiring PMs at some points who were working kind of directly with the engineers in the engineering org.
Okay.
With time that grew, and eventually we understood that what we really need is this independent product organization with, especially now that, we're not a huge company, we're still 150 people. And so at the end of the day, the leadership needs product representation. So having an independent product org that is focused on strategy and is actually key in assigning that strategy. Because what you really want, you don't want product people that get assigned tasks, right? You want product people who figure out what we need to build. And for that, they need to be involved in strategy, have a seat at the leadership table.
Makes a lot of sense. And what would you say changed in Stellar with creation of this vertical and adding you to the decision-making table?
So, Stellar always had a clear laser focused on real world utility, right? So I think we've never been part of the hype cycle. We've always been, our mission is about creating equitable access to the world's financial system. And so I think having that as like this lighthouse has been super helpful throughout the years. What has changed in kind of like making product first class in the org is just having like this shared vision across the org of like what that actually means. What are the metrics? What are the key performance indicators that we're looking at? And have that shared so that at the end of the day, like an engineer and a BD person and a marketing person, a product person, they can all sit in a room together and they have a shared vision of how we actually get to that universe of equitable access.
When I talk to layer ones, layer twos product teams, it's interesting how different the view of who the customer is between different organizations. Because some say that it's founders, builders, developers, and they focus on developing products and interfaces and tooling for developers. Some are thinking about the end user that would be using dApps built on their chain. So how are you thinking of your sort of target audience, your user that you're building for?
Yeah, I think that's a very difficult question and one that we argue a lot about, and I know in blockchain in general and Stellar specifically. I think that the bottom line is that it's really hard to just pick one. And I think the important thing is to pick a vision, kind of like where we want the ecosystem as a whole to go. And then from there, you can look, I would say probably like the three main stakeholders, the ones that you mentioned are, you have the end user, of course. You have the product builders and the financial institutions that are kind of like, building products. But you also have this top of the funnel developer community. And, there's a lot of, I would say, intersection with like the product builders, but not completely. And you really want to cater for these developers because, a lot of them, they come for fucking around with cool technology and they end up building amazing products, right? So you kind of like need to include all of these stakeholders in your vision. And as a product org, we have, a PM that's focused on developer experience, PMs that focus on specific commercial verticals, payments, real world assets, tier one assets, DeFi, which we've recently introduced smart contracts. So there's like a booming DeFi ecosystem now in Stellar. And you can't ignore any of these. So it's really important to have all of these stakeholders being accounted for.
The earlier part of this event was about us being in a bubble, and there are too many chains in existence. I mean, being one of the chains, do you agree that there are too many? And kind of how do you see it developing?
Yeah, I think obviously I have a bias here. We used to say, I think in 2018 or when I just joined in 2019, when all these like ICOs were happening and all these like new projects, there was this joke where the kind of like the last legit project is the project that you've built, basically. And so, look, I think that having more tech is great, but we definitely are, and I like the theme of your event here. We're definitely in an infrastructure bubble. I think that there's like a strong misalignment on what creating value actually is in the blockchain ecosystem as a whole. And the question of like why is an interesting question. I think there are a bunch of reasons. I actually would love to hear what you think as well. But I think one thing is that the fact that people perceive value as token and like token price and speculation and bring that into the mix rather than product market fit, which is delivering real world impact on your users. I think that's a really big problem. I think it's compounded by the fact that a lot of builders in this space, and I mean no disrespect, a lot of people actually have started their careers as builders in Web3. So they haven't really gotten a feel for what like product market fit really is. So in their heads, it's all about tokens. And when you're playing the token game, the infrastructure is like the easiest play because, you know, that's kind of like the widest funnel and you can, your theoretical value that your token can accrue is maximal. Whereas what I would really love to see in the space is kind of like going back to the roots of classic product market fit. The same type of doctrines that we've saw in like the lean startup and that style of like fast iteration, minimal viable product, actually listening to your customers, talking to your customers. And one of my biggest grievances is with this idea of like onboarding the next billion. I think that if you, and I don't know if this is like a marketing spiel or if some people are actually sitting in front of a whiteboard and thinking, how do we onboard the next billion? Like, stop doing that. That doesn't help anyone. What you really need to be doing is thinking about onboarding your first user, listen to them, the first 10 users, listen to them, iterate, grow. This idea of like thinking immediately, jumping to 1 billion users, like try to imagine a billion people. There are no faces when you imagine a billion people, right? You want to have this like connection to your users, and you can't have that if you're thinking about a billion.
I'm actually going to disagree with you on that. I've seen time and time again projects kind of coming with the idea that, we're going to drive mass adoption. And the success metric is TVL. And they very quickly realize that they can get that TVL by making 10 phone calls. And they do. And they end up building product for those 10 people that is exact replica of what already exists, maybe slightly different color and a different name. And therefore, the product is utterly unusable for the next 1,000 people because it's all about whales and it's all about all of those sort of very spooky, detailed parameters that an average person doesn't even want to know the definition of, leave alone play with. So I agree with you that the journey to product market fit always starts with 110, 100,000. But if you don't think about mass adoption from get-go and you don't set right success metric, it is extremely easy to fall into the usual trap where, people rebuild what already exists, just give, kind of few more percentage points APY and steal LTV from another protocol. And it's a zero-sum game because, this money just flows through the system, leaves one protocol, goes to another. It's bloody hard to build, kind of a product for million users to use. A lot harder than, for 10 people, especially when they're already playing in the space and that all you have to do is just give few percentage points, high return or whatever yield, and all of a sudden they're with you until somebody else gives them a few percentage points more, and then you're back to square one.
Yeah, I respect your disagreement, and I agree with you. I think that like part of it is actually choosing the right KPIs and the right metrics to actually measure success. TVL is a really shitty metric to measure success, right?
Guys, important, I'm not the only one, TVL is a shitty metric, Cointelegraph. Can we have an article, starting, kind of with the title, TVL is a shitty metric?
Sure, you can quote me on that. TVL is a shitty metric, and I think, especially in the DeFi space, because there's so much noise around the token allocations, around airdrops. Airdrop farming is like completely like muddying the waters. And so if you are building a product and you're looking at like gameable metrics, if you're trying to game your own metrics, you're gonna fail, right? So if you choose metrics because you can game them, then go home, leave us alone, right? But if you're looking at quality metrics, if you're looking at actual, quality, daily active users, monthly active users, people that transact meaningfully on chain, then I think it's a whole different story. But we do have a problem in crypto. Like people are looking at the wrong metrics, and all of them are gameable. And a lot of on-chain metrics are problematic because the nature of anonymity on-chain means that these things are extremely gameable. So if you do have a user-facing application, I would recommend going through the route of actually doing your in-app metrics rather than looking at on-chain metrics, because on-chain metrics are very, very dirty.
Interesting. That's quite an unusual point of view, and I appreciate it. I think that we've been drumming the idea that active users need to become a success definition going forward, because TVL, nobody or very, very few types of projects make money on anything locked, right? We normally make money when something is moving, something is in motion, when there is a transaction, when there is a purchase, when there is a swap, not when something just sits there and does absolutely nothing.
And by the way, like I'm talking to a lot of the big asset issuers out there. When they show their metrics to the ecosystem, they talk about TVA because these are big numbers and people like them. When I'm in the room with them alone and we're talking about interesting metrics, I think what they're actually talking about is velocity, like how much of your circulation is actually moving, right? The fact that you have a bunch of whales, the fact that you have Binance holding like $300 million of whatever asset, and that accounts for like 95% of the TVL of it, that means nothing. That means jack shit, right? But if you're looking at the velocity, if you're looking at active users, not necessarily active addresses, active users, that's a different story.
Question. So, have you seen anybody solving the bot problem and really figuring out what user is and what, and separating them from bots?
I've seen a lot of people try, but to be honest, when I'm really interested in gaining insights to what's going on in a Stellar ecosystem, for example, I use my relationships with the companies and I ask like companies that are active in the space, the ones who are actually like in front of the user, what's going on. And these companies that are usually they have some like, especially because they deal a lot with like on and off ramping, they have KYC information, they actually know what's a real user. And so it's much easier to get information from these wallets that are like first line. And by the way, sometimes you actually get more, especially with like the custodial wallets, you're actually getting more users than what you see online, because there's actually a lot of transactions that are like not accounted for because they're kind of like internal transactions within the system. But from my perspective, if you're moving USDC on Stellar, even if it's like within a closed ecosystem, I still consider that a very important thing to count.
Agreed. And what does Stellar do differently from other ecosystems to be the player in that kind of future world where probably there will be fewer layer ones and layer twos serving larger number of customers?
Yeah, so like I said, we've always been focused on this idea of like real world impact and equitable access. And this hasn't changed throughout the years. We've changed our tech stack a lot, we've added smart contracts, and now there is a DeFi ecosystem in Stellar. But the bottom line has always been focused on like the real world use cases. And so we've been promoting this both in terms of like our business development, both in terms of kind of like the marketing, messaging, and who we engage with as an ecosystem. And I think if you look at other blockchains, which I'm not going to name, there's all this conversation about onboarding the next billion, becoming the next web, all these like really big amorphous vision statements without a clear vision. Like, what are you actually talking about, right? And I think this is like really important. I think that if you're active in any chain, please talk with people around you, try to figure out what this thing is actually good for. So I think I'm happy to talk about some use cases that we're seeing in Stellar that kind of like reflect this. I think one of the things that excite me the most is we actually started a project in Ukraine 2 years ago with some of the UN refugee organizations. So we actually have refugees in Ukraine getting their aid directly to a Stellar wallet. So dispersing aid to refugees is actually a really big problem. A lot of times you have actual agencies like show up with cash, very hard to manage. very risky for refugees, especially because they cross a lot of borders. So if you have a lot of cash on you, that's problematic. And so we actually worked with the UN. We worked with MoneyGram, who's providing like an interoperable on and off ramp on the Stellar network. And so we now have refugees basically get a text, say, hey, download this wallet. They get a wallet that is funded with a certain amount of USDC. They can either keep it in their wallet or they can actually withdraw it in Kiev or in other places in which MoneyGram is still active to cash. So very proud about that specific project. I think
Absolutely love it. I think you're witnessing possible partnership right there because we do have millions of users in Ukraine. So
Yeah.
I think that we can definitely do something together.
Definitely. And yeah, I think like more generally speaking, this idea of financial accessibility is something that is probably one of the biggest hurdles for adoption. And I think this is something that it's a very unsexy problem, like figuring out how people move from cash in their wallet or money in their bank account into a crypto product. Very not sexy, very important in order to actually get adoption. So something that we've worked on, and I personally have worked on in my career at Stellar, is building standards for interoperable on and off ramps and actually onboarding these institutions. We call these anchors in the Stellar network. They provide interoperable on and off ramps. And the biggest one is MoneyGram. So you can actually go with a Stellar wallet, an USDC on it, to one of more than 300,000 agents around the world and get that value in cash in a physical location, which is a huge thing. And now with DeFi on Stellar, you can actually build a product that allows a user to move from cash to DeFi and from DeFi to cash, all in the same app, same user experience, very low fees. And I think that is really key to adoption.
Love it. Yeah, I agree with you that there are plenty of parts of the world where cash is still pretty much the only way people kind of interact with traditional finance.
Yeah, and not to bitch too much about crypto people, but I think that, and especially when I started at Stellar, I saw that we can move balances in like the speed of light and create transactions, and people in the crypto space think that moving a value between balances constitute as a payment, but it's actually not really usable if it just kind of like moved on a ledger. You really need to have like usable money. And so on and off ramps are super important. And these organizations like MoneyGram that we love to talk shit about in the crypto space as if we're about to replace them, the actual act of moving money cross borders is something that they know really well. So instead of trying to claim that we're better with these type of organizations, I think it's really important for the crypto ecosystem to work with them, modernizing their infrastructure and bringing crypto into the game, work together, not against.
Love it. Totally agree. You mentioned when we were chatting outside that you also had some questions to me.
Yeah, so I'm curious. I'm really curious about the interoperability aspect because I know that this is kind of like one of your major selling points.
Yeah.
How do you think about interoperability between chains and what's the role of wallets? What are the challenges that we still need to overcome? And do you have any ask of me as I work on a chain?
Yeah.
What should we do to make your life easier?
Wow, that's a big question. I always, as a product person first, think of the user. And I think users, especially next billion, really can't give a flying monkey about the chain. They really care about assets. And that is actually one of the reasons why I think I am excited about meme coins. Kind of a lot of people are knocking them. But I actually feel that it's a good idea for people to think about assets as opposed to chains. And until kind of meme coins, it's always been ecosystem, tribal, Solana versus ETH, etc. So all of a sudden, we're starting to look at assets. If this is the paradigm that you want to deliver, then you abstract chains completely and you focus user on a full and complete picture of their portfolio, no matter what chain they are on. And I wouldn't think about it as interoperability because that is a chain-centric even word. It is about chain abstraction. And I know the chains don't like this, but the reality is AWS is abstracted, GCP is abstracted, Azure is abstracted. Nobody knows what cloud system is used when you use an app, as long as it works. And that is the future that we want to bring to our users. You have all your assets, you don't care what chain they're on. And I think we also need to think about simplification of operational security. I don't know about your experience, but you know what? I lost wallets, I lost six phrases. I still have some assets that I know I had somewhere, and there was a seed phrase written down somewhere or saved, but I can't locate it. This is a mess. This is something that needs to go. So, kind of simplifying operational security, removing all of this complexity of different accounts on different chains, and allowing users to manage it from one interface and recover all of that assets from one kind of device to another. Because one of the things we realized by focusing on the mobile, there is a 1.5 to 2 year cycle of people changing devices. And if you're not thinking about it, then you're going to be in massive heap of bother when people try to install wallet on a different device. It needs to be, kind of seamless to migrate there. In terms of my ask, I think that, kind of the example that you've given with MoneyGram and, kind of servicing Ukraine, I think is fantastic. We have a lot of users there. Some of the top winners that we had, we had a Ukrainian chap winning Tesla Model Y in Odessa. We failed to deliver it to him because he said, please don't, it's a white car. The rocket is probably going to land on it because it's probably going to be the whitest dot on the street of Odessa. So we had to give him, cash equivalent. But yeah, we have a lot of users in Ukraine, and we know that we should and can help them. So that's one thing. But long term, I believe that there will be handful of chains that will exist. It's not going to be one, it's not going to be two, it's not going to be three. I think there will be, probably several dozen, but not 1,000. And what I believe is going to happen are the ones with the highest throughput and lowest cost are going to be the ones that will ultimately, kind of eat everybody else's lunch. And decision what chain is used to store or transfer assets is actually going to be made by front ends on the basis of current price and current security rating and current speed of delivery. Because when user will be making a decision to transfer, when you make a transfer, you don't care if it's Swift or Bax or fast, transfer or whatever it's the system. So I believe that in the future, front ends will effectively allocate transactions and volume and therefore revenues on the basis of chain's performance.
That's awesome. I really like this idea of being focused on the user and not on a chain and the user experience. We've definitely seen, and we get I'm myself, even though I'm obviously Stellar. We're not chain maxis, and we have a lot of members of the ecosystem that actually came from other ecosystems. And because of this, the nature of financial accessibility at Stellar, I think that we're seeing a lot of wallets come in for to be able to have the MoneyGram integration and interactions. And by the way, MoneyGram is just one example. We have throughout the world dozens of anchors, and you can even if you're in Brazil, you can move through Pix to from USDC to Stellar very easily, and in a lot of regions of the world, super easy. So we're seeing a lot of folks coming in from other ecosystems, and they come for the accessibility parts, but they end up kind of being Stellar pill. We actually helped them produce a documentary that we released last month, and I highly recommend for people to watch it. It's called Crypto Saves Lives, and it's about a specific village in northern Colombia, ironically called San Francisco, but not San Francisco, California. And it's a very small town that has really seen kind of like a jump in the financial literature there because people now have access to they do like gig economy jobs on the internet in the US, and they can get paid in USDC, and they can take that USDC, they can keep it in their decaf wallet, they can take it out in like the local MoneyGram agent for like zero fees, and suddenly they're seeing like a boom in people that are not leaving town because they can, stay there and work and kind of like make money, and they're saving, and they're actually seeing kind of like new businesses open up because they now have access to financial services that they didn't have before. So I think just kind of like the basics of payments, checking account, and basically earning yield, like a savings account, whether that is backed by kind of like real world asset style bonds, or maybe through more kind of like conservative DeFi instruments. I think that's the big stuff.
So what I'm hearing is that you believe that Web3 is going to kick ass of fintech?
What do you mean when you say that?
Because the stuff that you just described is typically the narrative of a neobank serving new users because classical banks couldn't bank these users because they had $10 to their soul, but that's too little to warrant opening an account and having a building, etc. And the free app can. And a lot of fintech and a lot of neobanks are actually talking about financial inclusion, the lower cost to serve. And this is basically what I've heard from you now, that kind of you are eating fintech's lunch. Do you feel that crypto and Web3 can actually displace fintech?
I wouldn't say displace, but it can definitely be complementary, especially in areas where the kind of like the regulation and the regulatory status doesn't really allow for easy creation of fintechs.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's because of Colombian regulatory environment that you feel that you were able to offer this service and the product.
I'm not going to comment on any regulator.
Okay. Yeah.
We love the regulators.
Yeah, not financial advice. I would actually go a little bit further than you. I think that there is something in TradFi and even in neobanks that they cannot do exactly because of the, not regulation, but because of simple architecture of the way they build, that we can do so much better that we will eat their lunch. An example is I have multiple bank relationships. Even if I wanted to, it would be really difficult for me to build a complete picture of all my assets across different banks. But being in Europe, there is this regulation, open banking, that allows me to retrieve information from various different banks. But if I want to manipulate it, I have to go to each individual bank's interface. What I'm excited about is that Web3, architecturally, is exactly opposite. All the banks or the asset holding and transfer layers are inherently decentralized. And therefore, you can actually build not just complete picture of your assets, but you can build an interface that allows you to manage them seamlessly. So that is so much better than existing traditional finance, where you need to juggle between banks. If you're making this transfer, then it's this bank. If you need another transfer, then it's this bank. You have full complete picture of your assets, and you manage them from that same interface. TradFi will never be able to figure it out, and regulators are not going to have balls to actually push through this, given how much money is coming from financial institutions to kind of fuel their election campaigns. So crypto and Web3 is going to displace quite a lot of the traditional fintechs over time.
Definitely, and the cost of switching is like nil, right? Like if you don't like your wallet and it's a self-hosted wallet, boom, you move your keys,
Exactly.
another wallet, right? So I definitely think it's kind of like from from a pure capitalist perspective, the advantage of this space is tremendous compared to TradFi.
Yeah, I just been given a unequivocal signal that we need to be wrapping up. Anything else, Tomer, that we should touch on before?
Very excited about what you're doing. Thank you so much for inviting me. If you guys are interested in real world impact, check out stoa.org. Talk to me. We have a lot of cool things going on. We have an awesome grants program that again is super like mission oriented. Yeah, we never got to talk around grant programs. That's a whole other thing that I think we can do better in the crypto space. And I think that throughout the lifetime of Stellar, we've gotten to a really good point with the Stellar Community Fund, which is our grant program, and I'm really proud of it and the type of programs that we finance.
Fantastic, Tomer. Thank you very much for being here.